Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on unlimited play. I'm your host, Caesar the Crowd Pleaser, aka Jedi, and today for episode 19, we're actually going to be piggybacking off of the set reviews that I just did and discuss Quadrant Theory. That's right, this is something that was coined by a magic podcast, which I'll bring up in a moment. I figured I might as well bring it to Eternal. I'm sure some of you already know about it, but others do not. And so I'm going to go in depth about the theory to help you do your own card evaluations when you are doing your own drafts and kind of understand where I'm coming from when I do my card evaluations. But first things first, I want to go ahead and mention the YouTube channel. That's right, EJthePodcast on YouTube. That's where you can check me out as well as this podcast and other content like limited play, constructed play, special events, things like that, even pack openings I have on there. So definitely check it out. Throw it a subscribe. So if you can't catch me streaming live on Twitch, which I'll segue into that, you can catch me offline at YouTube. Now, to catch me live every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday afternoons, or mornings, I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep saying afternoons. You can catch me at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. Like I said, every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday mornings. Definitely check it out. Come hang out, chat. We could discuss picks, things like that. Really appreciate you guys hanging out. All right, guys, let's go into our pack one, pick one. All right. So I have a pack here opened up, and we'll start with the commons as usual. We have Sizzleback Salamander. That's the 2/2 beast for 3 and a red. Has Berserk, and you can twist it for 4 to deal 2 damage to a player. Card's good. I've seen it have some very explosive turns. It's normally close to an on-kill on-sight card. I think I'm fine first picking that. Next up we have Horde Duelist. This is a 2/2 charge warrior for 2 and a red. Yeah, it's fine. It's a filler, but I don't think it takes the place of Sizzleback unless you're kind of worried about being low to the ground. I don't think their 2 and 3 makes a difference. Even the more aggressive decks do want some 3 drops, and Salamander has some good reach. I'm going to be going through these a little quickly just because I feel like people are starting to get a lot more practice in the format and more familiar with the cards. So as the time progresses, I'll go over the cards a little bit quicker. We have Bryn Scrying, not even a pick. We're going to move on. We have Horn of Plenty. That's the relic for 5 at a time. They give all your units a +1/+1. Card is solid. I recently had a discussion with people in the draft about potentially first picking it. I typically want to wait a little bit for 5 drops, especially that card. It is easily splashable, but you really want to be the kind of deck that goes a little wider, like a little heavier on units to really capitalize on it. Next up we have Char. That's the fast spell for 1 and a red. Deal 2 damage to any enemy. Yep, that card is great, solid. Might actually take that over Salamander just because of its flexibility and pseudo removal. Could go face, take out an early unit. Next up we have Needle Spitter. Yeah, not gonna play that. We have Nimble Conscripts, which is a good card, the 3/4 with Shift 1 and Reckless for 3, but it's not gonna beat out Salamander or Char. And our final common is Roosting Warhawk. That's the 3/2 flying bird for 5 and a green with Onslaught +1/+1. Card is good. It does some work. It's a solid filler, but once again, don't think it's better than Salamander or Char. And there's so much fire in this pack. So Char is still our front runner. Going into our uncommons, we have Gust Rider, the 1/1 flyer shaman for 1, and it has Onslaught. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Card's good. Being able to card selection, and it filters you actually do not go down a card because of the fact that you maintain a 1/1 body. If this was just a spell like Faithless Looting in Magic, you do go down a card for card selection, but typically those are with decks that throwing stuff into the void kind of isn't a loss for you. Next up we have Lothrai Dire Beast. This is a 3/3 lifesteal Dire Beast for 3 and a shadow, and it has Shift 4. Give one of your other units lifesteal until Lothrai Dire Beast emerges. Yeah, this card good. I like it. I like it quite a bit. 3/3 for 3 with lifesteal is extremely powerful. It's easily splashable, easy to play on curve because it only requires one shadow influence. And yeah, the fact that it can give a bigger unit lifesteal or a flyer, evasive unit is quite relevant. I like Dire Beast. Next up, we have Blurred Stygimoloch, or Stygimot. This is the 7/6 Overwhelm Dinosaur at uncommon for 10 and a time, but Blurred Stiggy costs 7 less if you have 7 power or more among your units. So rarely you're gonna bring this guy down on turn 3, but he can come down on turn 4 or 5 fairly consistent. I like Stiggy quite a bit. I think he is a must kill on sight because of the fact that 7/6 Overwhelm is fantastic. You can cheat him into play. Typically you are going to want to cheat him into play because 10 is a very steep cost. You're going to be waiting a very long time to play. So honestly for me, I think it's between the Dire Beast and Stiggy. Probably personally gonna go for Stiggy here. It's a little more high risk but a way more high reward. 3/3 lifesteal is a great unit. Sometimes it will win you the game but not always, versus the 7/6 is always going to impact the board in some state or another, some form or fashion. Either you can block and stabilize now, or you can start attacking aggressively and your opponent may not have an answer for it. So for me, Stiggy is the front runner now. Going into our rare, we have Crashing Avalanche, which is a fast spell for 3 primal. It has warp and deal 4 damage to each enemy unit and sight that was played this turn. Yeah, I have not played with this card. Reason being is I feel like it's going to be a less effective lightning strike. Granted, coming into play versus attacking is a thing. It does have the potential of knocking out 2 things in one turn, but I feel like that's going to be a corner case and not very often. In most cases, you'll simply play 3 to destroy or kill a unit that came into play this turn. And that's it. You're going to kind of capitalize on whenever you can play it. Like, oh, I happen to have 3 power open and they play something. Yeah, sure. Let's just kill it and move on because you're not really sure when the opportunity will arise again. That being said, that makes Crashing Avalanche not really a high pick for me. So we're still on Dire Beast and Stiggy. And like I said, I prefer Stiggy because I think it's just slightly more impactful, even if it is a little more high risk. So yeah, guys, that's the pack 1 pick 1 for this week. Hope you got a little something out of that. Let me know if you guys disagreed. Let me know in the comments below what your pick would have been. I would love to hear it. But all right, guys, let's go ahead and move into our main topic, which is the Quadrant Theory. So I want to go ahead and say that I did not invent this. This was created by Marshall Sutcliffe and Brian Wong on the Limited Resources podcast, which is a limited draft podcast for Magic the Gathering. And what the Quadrant Theory does is that it gives you a method of evaluating cards in multiple scenarios throughout a game to really find out if it is worth the card that you think. And this was created, to battle BCSM, or best case scenario mentality. So what best case scenario mentality means, and you've heard me mention it before on the show and on my stream, is it's very easy to see a card and picture the case when it would be an absolute bomb or blowout. Something like, for example, the Stormbreaker rare that we've opened up a couple of times, the 4/6 flyer that you can shift it deals 1 damage to every unit without flying. You can easily see that card and be like, oh wow, you know, my opponent went turn 1, 2, and 3 all X1 units that don't fly. So on turn 3, I play this and it kills all 3 of their units, and then on turn 4, I'm gonna have a 4/6, and that's just nuts. Like, that's amazing. It's a 4-for-1. Like, wow, oh my god. But if you take that into other scenarios, like for example, if you don't have double primal on turn 3, or if your opponent doesn't have any X1's health units, you know, things like that, then it starts to change the value of the card, where it might have been a windmill slam to all of a sudden just being an okay card or a good card. And so best case scenario mentality is something that we have as human beings that we have to battle, where it just is. We like to see cards like, oh my god, imagine if I did this would be amazing. Like, for example, another one, Harsh Rule. You see that and you immediately think about wiping 5 of your opponent's units off the board and none of yours, and then Harsh Rule is just amazing. But what happens if you have maybe 2 units on the board as well that you may not want to be, you might not be comfortable losing, or if your opponent only has 1 big unit that they're crushing you with, things like that. And so you have to kind of battle that. And the Quadrant Theory was designed so you can always logically place those cards in these different scenarios to evaluate it with a little more accuracy and a little less bias. One last thing I want to talk about before we completely dive in is the cards that affect the board, or KABS, K-A-B-S. So what this means is that you want to play with cards that do something the turn you play them. They either remove a unit, or they stun a unit, or they are a unit, or something. It adds to the board state, not just sits there and does nothing. This essentially affects the board state. And the reason why these cards are valued highly is because cards that do not affect the board state, i.e. you play them and nothing changes, they really have to have a high threshold for benefiting you in the long run for you to essentially take a turn off to play them. A good example of this in Constructed is Svetya's Sanctum. Svetya's Sanctum is a 5 power relic that does absolutely nothing when you play it. When you play it, it does nothing. But every time you play a spell after it, you get a golem with attack and health equal to the casting cost of that spell. So in Constructed, in Huru Control, it is actually well worth taking a turn off to do it, because the rest of your deck is spells, and so inherently you gain 2, 3, 4 cards off of it, virtual cards off of it, by creating a unit, or a unit that does affect the board by playing it. And so you're getting 2 cards off of one essentially after you took that 1 turn off to play it. That may not always be the case in Limited, and so you really have to pay attention to that when you see a card that seems powerful but does nothing when you play the turn you play it. Alright guys, those are the only precursors I have to it. So let's jump into what the Quadrant Theory is. Well, like I stated earlier, the Quadrant Theory is designed to prevent best case scenario mentality, and by placing a card in the 4 phases of a game. These phases are A, development, which are the first couple of turns. B, when you are ahead, which we'll go about in depth later. C, parity, when you were both even. And D, when you are behind. All right, so each of these phases require a different kind of board state, and the card may affect the board or react differently based off of what the board scenario is. So going a little more in depth in each one, let's go into the first one, which is development. These are the first couple of turns of the game when both players are trying to play out their curve, i.e. 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, hitting their sigils, etc., etc. This is important because you are limited on power here. So when you look at, for example, a 5 drop does absolutely nothing for you typically in the development portion of the game, because of the fact that you do not have 5 power to play. Granted, now with shift it might change it a little bit. For example, the tremor shaker essentially does come down as a 4, so it does help you a little bit there, but it's typically the first 4 to 5 turns of the game, and 5 might even be a little high. It's typically the first to 4 turns of the game. Another thing like this is, for example, an expensive removal spell, something that costs 5 or 6. You know, does it do what you need it to do in the development portion of the game? No, it doesn't, because 1, it's typically going to be smaller units that might not be that important. Some will be, but so let's look at that. If there is a unit that is really important and you want to take it out, will a 5 or 6 cost removal spell do it in the development phase? No, it will not, because you don't have enough power. So that is something to consider. Things like that. Another thing is, like, for example, a 2 drop. A 2/2 for 2 is pretty standard. Well, when you top a deck a 2/2 for 2 in turn 8, you're really not excited. In fact, you're kind of sad about it, right? Well, on the development portion of the game, when you only have 2 power, a 2/2 for 2 is absolutely phenomenal and exactly what you want to be playing. So it is that kind of evaluation that you have to look at cards for the development portion of the game. Like, how do they play early in the game? This is when, for example, something like Char is great, because Char lets you, it having only 1 power or costing only 1 power means that you are able to hit it throughout your curve. So if you have on turn 3, you have only a 2-drop to play, you can use that 3rd power, should you have it, to play Char and stay on curve. Curve goes face, so that means it adds benefit later in the game, which we'll talk about in other phases. But yeah, so that's why Char typically in late game, you're not excited when your opponent, you're staring down like a 6/6 and you draw Char, or you have Char in your hand. You're not insanely excited about it. Granted, you could double block or block and then use Char to finish him off, etc., which is what we'll talk about later and what makes Char so good. But obviously it's not valued as highly as you would in the early stages of the game, when you could get a pesky flyer out of the way or something that you might not have another answer to for a couple of turns. So that is the development portion of the game. This also increases value for like ramp spells, for example, like a card that adds an additional power might not be that great when you're already sitting at 8 power. Going from 8 to 9 is not awesome, but on turn 2, if you play a Devotee of the Sands and it goes from 2 to 4 next turn when you play your 3rd power, now you're talking about some serious advantage on your opponent, especially if you're in a play. So now you're playing your 4-drop when they still might have to play their 3-drop. So that is something to consider when in the development phase. And this is why a curve is so important. You want to make sure you hit those cards in the early part, and why you want to try to stay away from having too many 5, 6, and 7 drops in your decks if it causes you to stumble on power or in the earlier stages of the game, and then an aggressive deck can just take you out. But that is just one phase of the Quadrant Theory. So moving right along to the next one, it is when you are ahead. This is typically when most cards shine and when you hear the phrase win more. A lot of cards that are good end up being even better when you're ahead because they are just dominating. And that's exactly what it is. When you are ahead, you have a better board state than your opponent. You are able to make profitable attacks, or your opponent is just underdeveloped. They might be power screwed, they might be influence screwed, things like that are causing your opponent to not play their game. This means you're able to continue to deploy your units and get in there while they are not. So evaluating cards, this is typically the one that you look at the least, because once again, if your opponent is starved for power, right? If they're stuck on 2 or 3 power, any old 4 or 5 drop is going to be amazing because it's going to be bigger than anything they're able to play. That being said, that same 5 drop later on when your opponent's playing 5s, well, now you have to compare it to the other 5s in the format. Like, does it size up well? Does it have utility, etc., etc.? I mean, a lonely 2-drop can be awesome if your opponent is stuck on power and they're not doing anything. Combat tricks go up in value, etc., etc. Now, the better board state could be a thing as well. So what happens when, let's say, for example, if a card has evasion, now it means like, okay, the board is the ground is gummed up, you can attack in the air. That causes it to increase in value. When you're ahead, you look at removal, same thing. Like, okay, they play one unit that might essentially stabilize the board state for them. Removal is valued highly here because you can get rid of their one blocker. Now all of a sudden you can attack with all your units again. Things like that allow you to go back and forth. Like, okay, a defensive card, like if your opponent attacks, kill all your opponent's attacking units. Well, this card is probably garbage when you're ahead because your opponent's not going to be attacking. So that is something to consider as well when evaluating cards. But like I said, overall, when you are ahead, most cards are at least good, are going to be better when you're, and if they're good, they're typically going to be great because you just win more. For example, all your attacking units get a +5/+5 or something. Like, that card is good, but if you're already attacking with all your units, it probably means you're already in ahead. So this is just gonna help seal the deal, which there is something to be said about cards that can finish the game as well quickly and give your opponent the least amount of chances to draw out of it. So once again, that was the ahead scenario when you have a better board state, when you are able to attack profitably, i.e. you have units with evasion and things like that, or the biggest unit on the board with some kind of backup combat trick to keep it alive, etc., etc. The third phase we want to talk about is parity. This is a stalled board state when there are no good attacks and you and your opponent are typically just kind of staring each other down. Maybe you're trading a little bit of damage here and there, but you're pretty much just stuck navigating your hand and the top of your deck and your board to see if somebody can finagle an attack. These typically happen when there's a significant amount of units on the board, so combat math can be quite difficult and really precise when you have multiple blocks, combat tricks, you're both holding X amount of cards in hand, things like that. This is actually the one that I feel like comes up most common, other than development obviously, in parity or in limited. And I think parity might actually be more because you spend more time in parity that you would in development, because at the end of the day, like once you all hit your power drops, then you can move on even if you do stumble a little bit. Parity is the most difficult to negotiate because you typically start off, I'm sure at some point there will be a time when you're top decking. When you're both top decking, that is a form of parity as well. And so that's when you want to look at a card like something that digs you deeper in your deck, like Scheme, might go up in value when you're at parity, because now you don't want to draw every single card in your deck. You want to draw the cards that make a difference or impact the board or break parity. Those are the kind of things that you value higher when you are at parity. Things that help you defend so your opponent can't attack you very well goes up in value as well, but removal spells really shine here. Let's say for example you guys are at parity because your opponent has a high health deadly unit that you can't attack through, right? Well, if you draw that removal spell and you get that unit out of the way, now you can start attacking, so that causes that removal spell to go up in value. Evasive units go up in value as well if like I mentioned earlier, if the board state is stalled on the ground, so you guys are just kind of waiting to either get a key unit off the board or get something that has unblockable or something that can shift or something that can fly, all those kind of things come into play. A unit that might be able to ping for damage like Razor Quill or Stormcaller that can kind of continue doing its thing even at parity, or a unit like, for example, let's take what is it? Inscript etchings or scribed etchings, the relic that lets you scry for 2, or scout. I apologize, scout, right? This card you really don't want to see it early in the game because you rather play units and cards that affect the board state. But when you are stalled, being able to scout for 2 every turn essentially gives you half a card, because if it's a card you didn't want to draw, you can put it in the bottom and have a higher chance of drawing a card that is something you want to see. And over time, it will incrementally value out your opponent. Cards that draw you extra cards, puts you ahead, etc., etc. I'm saying that a lot, gotta stop. But yeah, so parity is just that. You are looking for cards that will break parity, i.e. allowing you to attack, remove an opponent's solid blocker, or stop your opponent from attacking you and giving you overall incremental advantage over the course of the game. This might also be alternative win cons go up in value. Like for example, if neither of you can attack each other, now you have maybe the Death Cap or Fungusaur, I forgot what they're called, that mills your opponent, or Eviscerate that puts more cards from their top of their deck into their void. These cards go up in value because it allows you to win a different way. Now you can just worry about stalling out the board state, not dying, and waiting to mill out your opponent, which is very relevant in this format. I've seen this happen more than one occasion, both for myself and other streamers. So that is something to consider and something to value when you're looking at cards that offer that alternate win con. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the final phase of the quadrant theory is when you are behind or when you are losing. This is the opposite side of when you are ahead. So when you are influenced screwed or choked on power, or when you are stuck with 5 and 6 drops in your hand, or what you drew, or you only have 1 unit, or let's say you have all ground units and your opponent has flyers, or your opponent has the biggest unit and they can easily attack into yours. All these things lead to when you are losing and looking for answers. So this is one of the most important phases to evaluate, because at the end of the day, it is bound to happen just because of variance. Even if you draft the most busted deck possible, there is still a chance you will lose easily because of variance. Like I said, you might only draw 1 color sigil influence, or you might not get enough sigils, or you draw the wrong half of your deck, or maybe your opponent's deck just matches up, their draws match up better to yours and they have an answer for everything. All these things come into play when you are and cause you to be behind. And so the last thing you want to do when in this scenario is draw cards that do not help you get out of it. The biggest fault are the win more cards. Like, yeah, when you are ahead, this card seems awesome. Oh my god. Yeah, for example, let's go back to that. All your attacking units get a +5/+5, right? Card sounds busted. But if you are behind, typically you're going to be blocking, i.e. not attacking. So giving all your guys +5/+5, all attacking units +5/+5 does nothing for you in that scenario. Occasionally, I will admit, if you have enough health, you can essentially just let all of them alpha swing or alpha strike you and then kill them on the crackback. But that is once again a corner case and something you have to evaluate best case scenario mentality, right? Removal is really good here because sometimes you are simply behind because there is a unit that you cannot handle or that is smashing you in the face. Drawing that key removal spell that can kill that unit and get it off the board will definitely help change the tide in your favor. What's another form of when you're behind? You want to evaluate that. So cards that make you win more are absolutely atrocious here. And that's where you kind of need to pick and choose your evils, because there are cards that are good in only one phase of the game, and so but they are good enough there or needed there, required, that sometimes the other phases or scenarios of the game will suffer. For example, the 2/2. You need the 2/2 for 2. You just need it. It has to go in your curve, if not you get ran over. Well, if you are behind and you need some solid blockers and then you draw your 2/2 for 2, you're disappointed in that. But that doesn't mean you're going to take it out, because you need it very much so for the development phase. Okay, so these are typically the ways that you will use the quadrant theory: development, when you're ahead, when you're at parity, when you're behind, to evaluate a card in a vacuum. That way, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh my god, this card's amazing, it does this, this, and that. Then you can sit there and look and be like, okay, what does it do when we are at parity? Does it affect the board? Does it do anything? Does it break parity? You can look at it when you're behind. Okay, if I am losing and I draw this card, how do I feel about that? And you could see, all right, when I am ahead, or at least I'm the aggressor, and I draw this card, how do I feel about that? And that way you can keep a realistic view of the card and figure out whether it needs to be cut or go in your deck, or even be a card you pick from the draft. Plenty of times you guys will see drafters and streamers draw or pass on a higher rarity card because it just doesn't do enough in limited. And so you can't forget that, regardless of how shiny it is. And sometimes just because it is all-star and constructed does not mean it is going to be an all-star in limited. For example, the cards that hate on markets, right? Some of them aren't even seen playing constructed, where everybody has a market. So if that's the case, then why would it be worth it playing in limited, where maybe 1 out of every 4 people you see will have a market? And even then, how relevant would their market be, considering it is a limited format? It's probably typically their draft shaft that they're just throwing in there to have an additional card just in case they need to get rid of a sigil. So that is quadrant theory, guys. Not a super in-depth, but enough to get your palpate wet and understand it. One other thing I would like to mention before we move on to the newest segment that I'm super excited about is to understand when cards are build around or work better with synergies. The Quadrant Theory is a great tool to use, but it is not the end all be all, because obviously each format has its own feel, and because of the way certain cards play out, other cards will be evaluated higher or lower. For example, Refresh. Refresh is a 2-power fast spell that gives a unit 4 health permanently. That's it, right? On the surface, typically you probably wouldn't run this card. It doesn't affect your unit's attack, so you're saving them from combat one time, and they may or may not be able to kill the other unit because, I mean, the opponent will know what the new health is, right? But in this format, having Twist, which eats up health to develop for some kind of card advantage, whether it's on that same unit, an effect, or another unit, that makes the value of Refresh go up. So if you took it into the Quadrant Theory, essentially, you wouldn't really want it in many cases because it just doesn't do enough. But when you know you can combo it with various Twist cards or units in your deck, it goes up in value. And so you can't always evaluate things in a vacuum. It is a good starting point, a good measuring stick to use, but you want to always look at the bigger picture as well to make sure it is what it's as accurate of assessment on whether it should make your deck or not as you possibly can do. But yeah, guys, that is it for Quadrant Theory. Like I said, didn't want to get too ridiculously in depth. I just want to go ahead and start introducing it and going over other forms of, like, you know, ideas and theories and stuff, so you can get better at Limited along with me, because we both are, and you can never get too much theory. I don't know, I like it. It's one of my favorite things. So yeah, but that's interesting. Let me reopen this real quick. So I have my what's the play thing opened up, and it's a video so I can remember what the plays were, but for some reason right now it is not. There we go. All right, cool, guys. So bear with me. I am going to try to describe this board state the best I can. Follow along. If you are watching this on YouTube, you probably can see this. Oh, wow, it looks a little shaky because I have multiple things, but I will have it on screen. So, I guess so. All right, guys. So I will, I guess, bring it off the, go off of memory. So, here's the board state. We have Cryptic Etchings. Oh, that's the card, not Sketchings. I don't know what I said earlier, but it's Cryptic Etchings is the relic that lets you scout, right? So, our board state, or our side of the field, we have 7 power, 3 fire, 3 time. We have a Cryptic Etchings that we just used to see the 4/6 Sentinel on the top of our deck for 5, right? Then we have Blink in hand, which is the 3 power, return a unit to the opponent's unit to opponent's hand, or their unit. I'm sorry, a unit to their owner's hand. Yeah. We have Marcin, sorry, her name's not on here, which is the 4/7 legendary for 8 time that at the beginning of every turn you get a random 2/2 Locust, 3/3 Sandcrawler, or 1/1 Scorpion. And we have a Daring Maneuver, which is the 2 and a red fast spell to give a target unit +2/+2 and Overwhelm. And we are at 17 health, and our board state is simply the Horde Duelist, the 2/2 charge. Okay. Our opponent's board state, they are at 18 life with 5 power, 4 justice, 1 primal. They have a Silenced Lightning Searcher. Oh, I forgot the names, but the 1/4 that you twist to loot, we silenced it, so it's a 1/4, nothing. They have a Geneve Merchant, I believe, is the 2/2 blue Aegis one. They have a Juntun, forgot the name. I'm so bad at names, my bad. But the 5/7 that you can shift for 5, and it is on its last tick mark. So on our opponent's turn, it will emerge. And then they have the 1/1 spell caster guy that every time you cast a spell, it gets a +1/+1. Okay, so we know we have the excavator on the top of our deck. And here is, you guys got the scenario. I hope it kind of makes sense in your head. So I had the initial plan of holding blink up, and then when they attack with their hurler, or the 5/7, when it comes in merge, I blink it back into their hand, so they have to shift it again because they're stuck at 5 power. And then it would buy me time to get Marcella or Marison on the board, because I knew I was gonna be able to scout after playing the excavator. Now, this will create a little bit of a hiccup, because I could also play the excavator, because I can only do 1. I'm stuck at 7. I don't have 8. So I can't play the excavator and blink. And I can't blink and play the excavator. I have to pick either or. Regardless though, I can still scout, so I can make sure I try to hit my 8th power. So, question is, on the next turn, would you leave up blink to bounce the 5/7, or would you play the excavator and then scout to make sure you hit your 8th power drop to play Marison? I understood that I wouldn't have an opportunity to blink. I am at 17 life, and the Jotun comes off of, or emerges next turn. So the turn I would play the 4/6. So take a moment, think about it, and let me know in the comments below what your play would be, or on Twitter. Do 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 do. That was the closest thing to Jeopardy I can think of. I might add the real song. We'll figure it out. All right, guys. So, despite my initial plan being to hold up blink and cost myself a little bit of tempo, but bounce their 5/7 and not take any damage, I ended up just playing the excavator, thinking I could block it. And I'm okay taking 5, going down to 11 or 12, right? Seems like a healthy life total. Well, what ended up happening is they got in for 5 and then played the 1/2 armor guy. I played the excavator. Then the next turn, I was at wait, why'd I go to 11? They did something. Something happened and I took 6. I don't remember now what it was. I apologize that I had the video so I could remember, and I didn't. Or like I said, it's frozen, so I don't know. But somehow I ended up taking 6. I'm trying to think, maybe they attacked with the spotter. I don't remember. But somehow I ended up taking 6, going down to 11. So then I went ahead and decided, once I read the Marison played a unit on both turns, I was like, well, I have 2 chances, or at least 1 chance to get a 2/2 locust to block the 1/2, or I could get the, scorpion, deadly scorpion on the ground to block the 5/7, or the 3/3 to chump block the 5/7. So I was in pretty good shape. So I played Marison, right? Our opponent, still stuck on 5 power, plays hold under, or no, not hold under, the other one, the I really apologize, guys. But anywho, it is the 5 cost spell that gives a unit flying and berserk. Yup, that's right. Flying and berserk. And Marison was kindly enough to make me a 3/3, the least relevant of the 3. The Scorpion would have been able to chump block the 5/7 and kill it, and the Locust Flyer would have been able to at least stop the 1/2 flyer from getting in. Needless to say, it makes neither. It makes the worst one, which is the 3/3. Our opponent cast that spell on the 5/7, making it flying berserk, and I had no flyers. So it flies over both my great unit, all 3 of my units, hits me for 5, then 5 again, and the 1/2 armor guy got in for the 11th point and kills me. Yup. So, after a minor discussion, I don't think there was a wrong play. I think both plays were viable. One for tempo, one for insurance. I should have played a little more conservative like I normally do, but at the end of the day, they had the perfect set of cards and power and everything to make that happen. So yeah, guys, that is the what's the play of the week. Let me know once again in the comments below what you would have done, and maybe we can make a discussion of it on Discord. I would love to hear your side of it. But all right, guys, that is going to be a show. I hope you enjoyed the new segment. Let me know. I'm going to keep doing that because when I stream or even just when I draft, there are plenty of scenarios. That's one of the things I love about these kind of card games, that there's plenty of discussion points and you could see what is right, what is wrong, and what there is no right or wrong answer to, and both sides are correct. Or just the endless possibilities. So I will continue to do this. Let me know once again what you think. You guys can catch me on social media at Twitter and YouTube at EJthePodcast. Follow me on Twitter so you get notified whenever new episodes and videos go out and whenever I go live. You can follow my real life stuff at CesarLabare7. That is CesarLabare7 at Instagram. And you can catch me streaming live at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday mornings. Once again, give me all the feedback you want. I am more than welcome to listen to it, both good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. Or if you want to do it a little more privately, you can hit me up on the Discord that is on my Twitch channel, or at EJthePodcast@gmail.com. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Once again, shout out to Limited Resources for creating this fantastic theory. And if you guys want to get some more limited content, the Farming Eternal podcast is also a great source of limited content. Those guys there do an absolute wonderful job of going through drafts as well as putting together the 7-win deck list to find out what cards are working, what color combinations, etc. like that. So definitely check them out as well. Once again, that is Farming Eternal and Limited Resources. And that's it. That's all I got for you guys. So until next time, happy gaming.